I want to talk about Kamala Harris for a second. Because Kamala Harris has also had an interesting year. At the top of 2024, Kamala Harris was probably not at the center of the conversation for a lot of reasons. Joe Biden was running for re-election, not her. She was going to be on the ticket, but there was no expectation that she would play any more of a prominent role than she did the previous 4 years. She was going to be the VP, like every VP is the VP. And then Joe Biden got slower and slower on the campaign trail. Then he had those debates, that debate. Then people said you can't win. Then he dropped out. Then Kamala Harris went from the bottom of the ticket to the top of the ticket. And for 107 days, she was the nominee, the first Black woman nominee, there's only the second woman nominee at all in the general election for the presidency from a major party. And then she lost. She has had quite the year, quite a ride. We could, if you want, feel free to say what you think this year is meant for her. But also, I'm thinking, like, what's next? What do you do if you're Kamala Harris? Like, I keep thinking about, like, when 2024 is over, who does Kamala Harris become? What does she do? How will our community receive her? I know how we receive Obama, but he won and he was the president, right? Yeah. I know how we respond to Michelle Obama, not just Barack Obama. There's a Jesse Jackson now sharp. There's spaces for people in our culture, in these political spaces. Does she occupy one of those spaces? Does she become one of our hallowed figures? Or does she just disappear into the ether? I wonder who she's going to be. I gotta say, after 15 months of genocide, I'm not particularly sympathetic, but I still, as an intellectual and cultural question, I want to think about it. Dr. Lindsey, I'm going to start with you. How do you make sense of Kamala Harris here for this 2024 and also moving forward?
I don't know. I really don't know where she fits in post this. And that's not just about her. When I tell people as a historian, when I say something is historic that has happened, doesn't always mean that historic moves me in some way that I feel like we've progressed there. If anything, her historic run has shown us a lot about this nation in its fullness. And the worst of it, the ugliness of it, where these fault lines are. I think a lot of fault lines are exposed. I think that she ran a campaign that is important for us to take a look at and reflect on deeply as we get a more distance from it, what she was up against. If I just think about this from the political climate, as you said, 107 days to mount a historical campaign for a half Black South Asian woman who was not terribly visible in terms of the Biden presidency in ways that had people already connected to her and rooting for her. We're going to be studying that as historians. We're looking at that. We're going to be looking at those who rallied around her, who mobilized with her, who were energized by her, those who were not energized by her response to genocide, her response to the death penalty, her response to various things, the Democratic Party's kind of fracturing and ineptness in this moment, and how we get to Trump 2, term 2 in this moment. I think she will be received warmly by a lot of people because of what she meant symbolically to a lot of people, what she mobilized and she was able to do in those 107 days. And conversely, I think she's not going to have an easy political future as a result of that easy space to kind of fit in and peg in, because the Democratic Party, within days of the election, was already throwing her under the bus. She's not going to necessarily find a space among kind of even liberals or progressives in the way that I think some may have believed she should be, and where the kind of Obamas occupy and the political consciousness. And then what role does she go to now? What was her political imagination before this? I don't think I know enough about President Harris to think about what her political calculation might be of what
I'm hearing Governor of California. I'm hearing Governor of California. Could you see that happening?
Oh no, like perhaps I think Dr. Lindsey makes a really good point. I think after 107 days of that campaign, a lot of what people were saying was, we don't know who she is consistently. Like she's not opening up, and a lot of people had questions on just like who she was. I had the fortune of covering like her campaign for Vanity Fair this year, and just going to like different events. I went to the DNC, and you saw so many people who were energized post like Biden dropping out. Like it wasn't grim. People were like ready, hype, energized. And you know, when she came out, people were like losing their shit. But what I also noticed was that from the crowds, a lot of people were asking her to speak on the genocide. And, you know, as we saw, people were ignoring it or tiptoeing around it this whole election cycle. And I think that, you know, that hurt her in terms of Democratic and liberal voters. Like there was in a sense of trust. A lot of people talked about how they were going to stay home, how they weren't going to vote for anybody, and how, like, you know, yes, she was the lesser of two evils, but there was very much as much as I saw energy, I also saw like timidness. Like I don't really know. And I think that, you know, that does leave a bad taste in some people's mouths. I ultimately think she will be highly regarded as somebody of a pillar moving forward, maybe in specific communities, like maybe specific subsets of the black community. I can't say as a whole because I know everybody ain't vote, you know, for her, but like, you know, I definitely see her being revered, but I don't know where she goes politically. I didn't get a sense that she was highly interested prior in this before like Biden stepped down. That's me, but I think I just wish her the best. I don't know. I can't predict, but I think she got some ground to cover in terms of building trust back from people. And
yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I know people on my side of the aisle and my side of the left even will probably never be able to reconcile her behavior and her choices with you know, some of our political aspirations. I mean, you know, I was speaking when she says that and shuts down those activists in Michigan. I think for a lot of us, for a lot of people in our community, that was the end. That was the beginning of the end. That was the moment where she was cold to genocide. That's the moment where she wasn't responsive to voters who were saying, "Look, give us a reason to vote for you. Like, we want an excuse to vote for you. Tell me something good. You know, tell me that you like me."
Yeah.
You know,
it was going to be an uphill battle no matter what. I don't want to downplay the role that misogyny plays in this. I don't want to downplay the role that Misogynoir specifically plays in this. I don't want to downplay that in terms of framing the national landscape. I also want to throw the Democratic Party in this conversation and their just horrible naming of our problem. You saw the death penalty for the first time taken off of the Democratic platform. You saw, you know, she's in interviews like, "You come to my house, I got my Glock." It was just so much of shifting farther and farther to the right. So that I'm speaking moment, where some people read that as there are definitely people who read that as a Black woman being interrupted, and she's like, "I'm speaking, don't do that. I'll give you your moment, but hold on." There are people who read that like that. And there were people who also read that I'm speaking of like, and you're speaking into a moment in which we're seeing people burned alive on our timelines. We're seeing journalists targeted. We're seeing hospitals targeted. We're seeing multiple genocides happening around the world, lest we forget about Sudan or what's happening in the Congo, or the kind of push of what was about to happen and happening in Haiti. So I think that there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of understandable distrust and anger that came from the left. But I also think there's a fracturing that happened between the left and those in the Democratic Party as well about what is this party trying to do? You kept trying to outright the right, and then people just chose the right.
Yeah.
Trying to out your immigration policy was farther to the right than Trump's. At one point he proposed initially.
You're gonna bring out Dick Cheney, right? You're gonna bring out Dick Cheney and have this fracking policy and this and this and this and this. It's like, you know, and you're just as hawkish on Palestine as everybody else. It's like at some point we might as well get a Trump.
You sent Bill Clinton and Richie Torres to Michigan to campaign for you. We're talking about and denigrating Palestinians in Michigan. This was not a smart, strategic way of moving. And I think there's a lot of harm that has happened. And I think the harm has also trickled into our movements and our spaces. And that's what I'm more concerned about moving forward, especially in this next term, is how do we move from this moment? Those who are in the Democrat on the left who didn't want Trump, but also like those who did vote for Harris and those who didn't vote for her, but also want a future that doesn't look like the future we seem to be barreling towards. How do we talk to each other? How do we engage each other? How do we stop the death dealing? Like, how do we do that?